So recently I decided to sell my retro game collection, and a lot of people wondered why. Really, the answer was very simple. I'd become a shelf collector. It was just kind of a cool display in my basement. I didn't really care about most of the games that I had. I wanted to sort of minimize stuff, get back to more games and having games in my collection that I actually have an emotional attachment to, or I can't emulate on another system. I had boxes and totes of so much crap, as you saw in the video where I sold everything, mostly everything, to Phoenix Resale. Make sure you guys check out that video. I'll have a card pop up right now. But yeah, you know, it was a very simple thing for me to do. It was very simple. People try to get deeper into the psyche of why I decided to do it, but it was exactly what I told you. I just felt like moving on from it, and getting a nice chunk of change didn't hurt too bad either. But a lot of people have been wondering, well, what did I actually keep in my collection? And am I still buying video games? And the answer is yes, I am still buying video games. Just games that I have an attachment to. Games that I want to play on certain systems that I still have. But I wanted to show off the games that I decided to keep in my collection in today's video. It's going to be a very long video. There's going to be lots of stories told about why some of these games are in the collection. I've told some of these stories before, but this is a nice way to have them all sort of in one thing. So yeah, if this is your first time on the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and share. Make yourself comfortable, because we're going to dive into what is left of my collection and why I decided to keep certain things. All right, so on the top shelf here, you could see I have a big boxed Knights. I have some Figma figures that my buddy Matthew Hennigan had sent me for Virtua Fighter, and I have a Virtua Fighter training pack. I won't talk too much about the Virtua Fighter training pack right now. It's basically just a VHS, a t-shirt, and a coupon to get money off of the Virtua Fighter for the 32X. This was kind of to tide people over, because originally the game was supposed to launch alongside of the 32X, and it didn't. It was actually delayed a bit, but what they ended up with was a great version of the game. But like I said, not going to talk too much about it, but I do want to talk about Knights, because obviously I have a weird obsession with Knights, and people don't really understand why I like Knights so much. And it kind of goes to something that's going to be something that's brought up a few times in this video, and that just goes back to KB Toys. Now, if you are younger than me, you might not have remembered KB Toy Stores, but that was kind of where I got most of my video game knowledge from, and I purchased my video games. It was either there or Toys R Us, especially at a very young age. Obviously, things like EB Games, software, etc. came along after the fact, but KB Toys was right near where my grandmother lived. My uncle actually worked there, which I thought was super cool. He worked there during the holiday season just to make some extra cash, and I was so jealous. But when you would walk into a KB Toys, there would always be these video game kiosks, and the kiosks were set up to essentially get kids to try out the new video games. You've seen them time and time again for various systems. I remember the first time I walked up and saw Knights in the kiosk, and I was just absolutely blown away by this game. I did not have a Sega Saturn at the time, but I wanted a Sega Saturn so bad because of that game. And I don't even necessarily know why. Maybe it was the color scheme of the game. Maybe it was the whimsical music, how fast everything moves. But it was definitely a game that I was just super attracted to. And of course, it had the 3D pad that came with it as well, which was kind of Sega's answer to the N64 analog stick, because that was all the rage. And I thought it was a really cool controller. It looked kind of futuristic and stuff like that. So Knights, huge part of my childhood. I eventually did get a Sega Saturn with Knights. I fell in love with it. I still love Knights. I love the soundtrack. Whatever, don't judge me. All right, up next we have our NES games here, and these are the only NES games I decided to keep, because each one of them I have an attachment to. Now, Super Mario Brothers is of course the first game that I think most people played with their NES. This was the first time I ever saw a video game. I was over at my uncle's house. He had just gotten a brand new Nintendo Entertainment System, and I was enamored with this. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Like, this was so cool to see a video game in action. He also ended up picking up Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, the only version of Punch-Out I still honor. And you know, like, the other Punch-Out is fine. You know, I get it that they got rid of Mike Tyson because of the situation that he was involved in and all the legal stuff, and yeah, that's a whole topic for another day. But for me personally, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out is still like the version of Punch-Out that I always sort of correlate with Punch-Out. If it doesn't have Mike Tyson and it's on the NES, I'm not interested in it. Funnily enough, when I decided to sell my game collection, my uncle actually asked me, "Are you keeping Mike Tyson's Punch-Out?" And I was like, "Of course, dude, of course." And then we have Double Dragon. Double Dragon is a pretty cool story because I had never heard of Double Dragon. I didn't know it was an arcade game. I didn't know anything about it. Basically, I was being babysat by this kid named Joe and his sister. I think his sister was the one babysitting me, but Joe went to the same elementary school as I did. He was in 5th grade and I was like in 3rd grade, I believe, and we were playing video games. And he was like, yo, son, you ever played Double Dragon before? And I was like, what? I was like, what is Double Dragon? What is this? And then he turned on Double Dragon, and I was like, oh my God, this is so, like, this dude is whipping ass. This dude is beating people up. This is the greatest thing in the world. And that, because of Joe, he introduced me to Double Dragon, and I was obsessed. And I've loved Double Dragon ever since. And then, fast forward to when I was like 12 or 13, when Pecker Dupree and I went to Micro Center, which was a place, I think that was the name of it. It was a place that sold video games. And there was this little piece of shit named Wayne that worked there. I only know his name because he had a name tag on. He was like 5'2", balding with like a Hulk Hogan skullet and these little glasses. And we were talking about Double Dragon, and he was like, Double Dragon? You guys haven't beaten Double Dragon? Everyone's beaten Double Dragon. And I was like, screw you, Wayne. I hate you. But yeah, I love Double Dragon. We also have some Legend of Zelda games here. No attachment. I didn't play these as a kid. I just like them because they're crispy gold copies. Now, the only Super Nintendo game I have is Ken Griffey Jr.'s Winning Run. And once again, that was a KB Toys thing. Like, you would go into KB Toys and you would go towards the video game section. And you hear this pulsating music and you're like, yo, what is that? It's like, no one can stop this. 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 And I was like, holy hell, what is that? And then it was Ken Griffey Jr.'s Winning Run's theme song. It was just so infectious. It was such a cool song. And then you played the game and you're like, this is a really fun baseball game. I never owned it as a kid. I never owned a Super Nintendo, but I'll always remember going to KB Toys and playing that game and just almost like dancing to the music, like moving right along, we get into the N64 side of things and the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time Gold Edition. So this game is very funny. I had a subscription to Nintendo Power. I was 13 years old. I remember exactly where we were living. And so I thought I was like, cool, you know, I had Nintendo Power. It was 20 bucks a year. My mom got it for me. Super cool stuff. I come home from school one day and there's a package with my name on it at the front door from Nintendo of America. And I'm like, all right, they're honoring me because I've been a subscriber for Nintendo Power for the past year. They're sending me a gift. I wonder what it is. And I ripped open that box and it was that gold edition Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. I freaked out. I was running around the apartment just screaming my head off. I was so excited. My mother was at work and my dad wasn't home either, so I was home by myself. So I run over to the phone. I call Mom. Mom, guess what? Guess what? She's like, what? I was like, Nintendo loves me. They sent me. Nintendo loves me, mind you. Never mind the fact that, you know, 20 plus years later, Nintendo hates me. I was like, they love me. They sent me the Legend of Zelda game Ocarina of Time. And she just got real quiet. And I was like, why aren't you talking? And she was like, you're an idiot. And I was like, what? And she was like, they didn't send, I bought that for you. That was supposed to be a gift. And I was like, oh. I was like, well, can I keep it since I already opened it? And she was like, yeah, that's fine. So Nintendo did not send that to me. You can see here we have some of the classics, GoldenEye, Wayne Gretzky Hockey, which I remember my uncle, the same uncle, buying for $75 at Toys R Us because he got an N64. Super Mario 64, once again, my uncle got an N64. He always got the video game systems before I did. And I remember going over there and playing Super Mario 64, and I was like, this is it. This is it. We have hit peak graphics. Nothing can be better than this. Look at this game. This is absolutely insanity. This is just insanity. You cannot get a better looking game than this. It's so big. It's so massive. And yeah, just I was in awe of this game. I would start up the game and just stand outside the castle staring at it in awe. I remember I rented an N64 from a video store that was near our house, and I rented Super Mario 64, and that's what I would do sometimes. I would just be like, I can't even play this. Like, this is so amazing. This is the craziest thing in the world. Of course, we have the WCW N64 games. Honestly, I know everyone's like, where's No Mercy? I didn't play No Mercy as a kid, so it kind of just passed me by. I had gotten rid of my N64 by the time No Mercy came out. So I was a WCW kid. I played World Tour and Revenge. Revenge is the peak for me. I don't care what anyone says. Moving right along, we have our two Nintendo GameCube games. I know, massive collection. And very diverse games: Metal Gear Solid, the Twin Snakes, and Street Hoops. Now, Metal Gear Solid, the Twin Snakes, I decided to keep that because I'm a Metal Gear fan, but after I fell in love with Metal Gear Solid 2, that was actually the first Metal Gear game that I bought. I ended up getting a GameCube, and I bought that game to experience Metal Gear Solid 1 because I had originally played it when I was like 13 with Pecker Dupree, but he was mostly playing it, I was mostly watching it, so I wanted to play it for myself, so that's why I kept on to that. Now, Street Hoops, you know, RGT was kind of a hood rat. He was kind of a hood rat at times, and he had a Ford Explorer in high school. And basically, I had picked up an Intech GameCube screen for my GameCube that I had, that I, of course, was playing Metal Gear Solid on. But I also picked up Street Hoops because at that time, Street Hoops was like, you know, a popular thing. Like, you had the and one stuff, the professor, skip to my Lou, which is Ray for Alston, all that sort of stuff. So Street Hoops and like basketball culture was really starting to catch on as far as more of like a cultural thing, more so than just a sport. So I picked up Street Hoops and I had that little GameCube Intech screen, and so I put it in my car on the Ford Explorer on the armrest. I attached the GameCube to the armrest. I put the flip up game Intech screen on it. So I had a GameCube in my car. We used to go like 9 deep in that bitch. Like, I don't even know how we had so many people in there, but I specifically remember sitting outside of a seafood restaurant because one of the boys wanted to visit his girl who worked at the seafood restaurant, and we were 9 deep. He got out. We were 8 deep in that thing, hotboxing it, just ridiculous, playing Street Hoops. And then, of course, you had the Dave Chappelle skit that had Street Hoops in it, where he goes to the children's hospital and beats the shit out of the kid playing Street Hoops. I love Street Hoops. It's still a good game. I played it the other day when I was showing you guys the GameCube controllers I got because I love that freaking game. So shout out to Street Hoops, man. It surprisingly holds up very well. Like, for a sports game, it holds up very, very well. Just so many memories of just smoking pot with the homies, you know, playing GameCube in the car, and we played Street Hoops. And that was all we played. And of course, the soundtrack was really good to that too. How bizarre that a video game channel talks more about Street Hoops on the GameCube than, of course, Metal Gear Solid, the Twin Snakes. Now, as far as the Wii stuff is concerned, I just decided to keep stuff that I remember playing a lot of, and these are the games that I played a whole bunch. It's kind of weird because you're gonna be like, there's no Zeldas here, like, why is Obscure the Aftermath showcased? I was a big fan of the Obscure franchise. I remember me and my buddy Malott, which was my best friend in high school, and yeah, we're still very good friends to this day. We had gone to a GameStop, and we had seen the first Obscure game for PS2, and we had never even heard of it. It was a co-op survival horror game. We absolutely loved it. And then when the sequel came out, it was like, oh, okay, cool. We have to check that out. So very fond memories of playing that game. I absolutely love that game. Of course, there's some knights in here as well. Some shooting games on here because obviously, you know, it's kind of tricky to get the light gun shooters. And I really feel like the Wii did a great job with light gun shooters. Wii U, honestly, just games that I just felt like keeping, honestly. You know, I love Batman Arkham City Armored Edition. I think that's the best version of the game because I feel like they used the gamepad in such a unique way that just makes it worthwhile. It makes it worth playing that version of the game. You know, the Wii U is kind of touted as having the definitive versions of these games. And really, I feel like Batman Arkham City and Deus Ex were like the 2 games that were actually the definitive versions of the games because of the use of the gamepad. It was just so much better than what the other platforms had at that time. And when it comes to Nintendo Switch stuff, random. You know, honestly, when it comes to newer systems, even like PS3, Xbox 360, I kept the games that I actually want because I kept those systems. So with the Nintendo Switch, a lot of games I have digitally because of review copies, or I just bought the games digitally when they were on sale. These are the physical games I decided to keep. Yes, I sold a lot of the physical games that I had duplicate copies of, or just stuff that I didn't really care. It's like, I'm not going to play this anytime. I'm not going to play Pokemon, Let's Go Pokemon, or whatever the hell it was called, with the Pikachu and it had a little Pokeball. I already beat that. I don't want to play it again, but it was worth a lot of money, so I decided, hey, you know, I'm going to sell that. So here we have some Virtual Boy stuff because I am a Virtual Boy fan. It's a system that you can emulate, but it's better to actually experience it. And I say better very, very loosely by experiencing it by actually having the console. So you know, I still have a Virtual Boy. I decided to keep my Virtual Boy games that I had in my collection. We also, of course, have Super Mario Land 2, the 6 golden coins. This was the pack-in title of the Game Boy that I got from my mother when I got a good report card. I don't remember how old I was, but I do remember going to KB Toy Store to pick it up. It was when they had the electronics of the video games towards the back of the store, which they ended up moving towards the front of the store later on, which I always thought was really weird. But yeah, I remember picking this up. Absolutely loving this game. It's available on Nintendo Switch Online, so just very fond memories of playing that game and trying to, you know, in the backseat of a car with a Game Boy, trying to get the street lights when it was nighttime playing it. But great soundtrack too, fantastic game. And then of course we have some Nintendo DS titles, and you're gonna look at these titles and be like, this is a very random assortment. I will try to go through them very quickly though. Metroid Prime Hunters is my most played game of all time. Me and Malat used to play this game all the time. We figured out that you could disconnect from online without getting, because they had a ranking system online, and if you disconnected, you lost points. However, if that was only if you just straight up like rage quit. If you ran away from your router, you could actually disconnect and it wouldn't count against you. So like there, I remember I had a second floor apartment, so like if we were like going up against a hacker or something, because there was a lot of hackers in that game, we would just dip out of the apartment, run down the stairs and run down the street like, come on, come on, come on, come on, and then it would disconnect and we wouldn't get in trouble. But we played that game online so much. We were in like clans and stuff like that. It was absolutely ridiculous. Nano Stray actually had online leaderboards, and him and I were both in the top 10 for the online leaderboards. It was just like super cool just to be on those. I loved Resident Evil DS. I thought it was just a super cool game. You know, some of these, like I said, they're kind of random. Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow, just a game that I really love and I really enjoy playing. So yeah, that's the DS stuff. 3DS stuff is even more random. Ocarina of Time 3D, I literally only kept because I couldn't find the cartridge, and I found the cartridge after the fact. It was for some reason on my nightstand in my bedroom, which, okay, whatever. Street Fighter 4, the Super Street Fighter 4 3D edition. This game was the first game I bought with my 3DS, and it actually ended up becoming my most played 3DS game. I hated the online because the online was so ridiculous. Like, it had the touchscreen control, so people would just spam Guile stuff like Sonic Boom, Sonic Boom, Sonic Boom. It was ridiculous. But if you played with that off, it was super fun. And then we have Shinobi. Now, why does RGT have Shinobi on the 3DS? Why did that game get kept? And that's honestly because that was the game that got me into video game journalism. I had started writing for a website back in 2012, and this was the first game I reviewed for them because I had a 3DS, and then subsequently I ended up getting a Wii U, so I ended up becoming the Nintendo guy by default on that website. And yeah, this was the first review I ever did that was published, and so it was a memory because that's part of this journey that, you know, 11 years later we're at where we are with this channel right now. So this is probably one of the most important video games, not for memory's sake, but for just the sake of me, you know, as a content creator, for me as an individual. So very fond memories of that game, and that is my Nintendo stuff. So kind of a weird smorgasbord of stuff. Now we're going to get into the Sega, and then we'll look at PlayStation and Xbox stuff. We'll take a little bit of a break, though, because I know there's been a lot of talking going on. So go ahead and get yourself a drink and maybe take a whiz, and we'll be right back. All right, we're back. So now we're going to take a look at some Sega stuff. And once again, each one of these games pretty much has a story attached to it. I realize this video is already pretty long, but I'll try to keep the stories down to a minimum. So this was a little cool display that Games You've Loved actually sent me after I had my little health incident. They sent me a little care package, so shout out to them and their Twitter account. But we have Miss Pac-Man and Sonic 3D Blast. Miss Pac-Man was a game that my cousin played a lot, and she was just in love with it, so it always just stuck out of my mind. And Sonic 3D Blast was a game that my biological father had bought for me during a Christmas season because I was a big fan of Sonic the Hedgehog. I ended up getting my Sega Genesis with Sonic the Hedgehog 2 packed in from my biological father. And you might be saying, well, where's your copy of Sonic the Hedgehog 2? I actually have that Sega Genesis pack in with Sonic the Hedgehog 2 as a system, like, so that's kind of, you know, my attachment to it because that was my first brand new to me video game system. That was the first system that I ever got brand new. You know, my uncle had given me his NES as a hand-me-down during Christmas once when he got a Sega Genesis, and I saw Sonic the Hedgehog, and it was like the whole Super Mario Bros. Thing. I was like, what the hell is that? Why don't I have this? This is what I want. But yeah, so I repurchased that. It wasn't the original one that I have. So that's where my Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is. I'm sure there's some people that are going to ask me. And Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is probably my favorite Sega Genesis game. I don't know if it's because of nostalgia or quality, but the music, the graphics, everything about it was just so spectacular to me. I love this game. It's one of my favorite video games of all time. Chemical Plant Zone is one of the best songs ever in anything, like in any sort of music. So yeah, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, freaking awesome. So then we have some more Sega Genesis games here. I know, kind of a random smorgasbord, but I was a huge Garfield fan growing up. I loved Earthworm Jim as well. WrestleMania, the arcade game, was one of my favorite games that I played on the Genesis as a youth. Games like World Series Baseball, though, and Greatest Heavyweights, those are probably kind of like outliers. You're like, why did you keep those? All these other games kind of make sense. You told the story about Street Fighter when you went to a Marriott and there was a hotel and there was a lobby and on the way to the pool, and that's where you played Street Fighter. You know, I told that story on my recent Sega Genesis video. But why these two games? Why a baseball game and a boxing game? Well, World Series Baseball, I used to play that at my uncle's house, and we would be up to like 1 in the morning, like eating chips and drinking sodas, having home run derbies with World Series Baseball. And it was a cool game because I liked baseball at the time, and it had like voices in it. It's a fly ball deep to center field. It's way back. Going, gone. Home run. It's out of here. And like, we would play that game all night long, and it was just so much fun. Greatest Heavyweights. Now, that is a boxing game. And I remember before we moved to North Carolina, we were living with my grandparents for a few months, the same grandparents I always talk about. And I had a little setup in the basement with a little like 9-inch television and my Sega Genesis set up down there. And one time my grandpa came down there to see what I was playing, and I was playing Greatest Heavyweights, and he was like, oh, it has classic boxers on there like Joe Louis and Muhammad Ali. And he's a huge classic boxing fan. So he actually came over and like started playing the game with me, and like that is the only time he's ever played a video game. But he liked that game, and I'm making it sound like he passed away. He hasn't passed away. You know, he's still alive. I just saw him the other day. But he loved that game because of the fact that it had all these classic boxers, and he loved the taunting because you could like hit buttons and taunt people and be like, mama's boy, sissy, and he just thought it was the coolest thing. So, you know, that's kind of the Sega Genesis side of things for me. Each one of these games, I just specifically remember playing as a youth and just loving as a youth. Moving on, we have a Sega Genesis Mini 2. I actually ended up with 2 of these somehow. And then we have frickin' Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on Game Gear. I will keep this story short, but I was 8 years old. It was my birthday. We went to the mountains of North Carolina because my stepfather's dad had a cabin there. We went there. It was like 95 degrees because my birthday's in July. There was no air conditioning on there. I'm sweating. I'm sweating to death. And it's just absolutely disgusting. Mosquitoes and stuff. There's like fans and stuff, but I'm miserable. And then my parents bust out the Game Gear with Sonic the Hedgehog 2 packing, and I'm like, yes! Yes, this is greatness. But I was like, hey, we need some batteries. Now, there's no Walmarts nearby. There's no Walgreens nearby. The only thing that's nearby is the general store. And when I say general store, I mean like fuddy-duddy ass 1950s general store. We go in there. I look for batteries. Do they have Duracell? No. Do they have Energizer? No. What do they have? Ever-Ready, with the stupid cat on it. And I don't like cats at this point in my life, not nearly as much as I don't like cats now, but I don't trust cats. And maybe this is why I don't trust cats, because they only had Ever-Ready batteries with the stupid cat on them. And I was like, well, okay, I guess it's better than nothing. You know, I need some batteries. So we ended up buying these stupid ass batteries. They lasted for like 15 minutes because we needed 6 of them. And then I could not play my Game Gear for the rest of the time until we got back to civilization. But yeah, and Sonic the Hedgehog 2, kind of a cool game. Sonic CD, I decided to keep because I really enjoyed the soundtrack. I didn't have a Sega CD growing up, but I went over to a relative's house who did have a Sega CD, and I remember just falling in love with the music of that game, so I decided to keep that. The 32X, my biological father had come to visit us in North Carolina. We went to this video game flea market thing, and I ended up getting a Sega Genesis with Star Wars Arcade. or a Sega 32X, I should say, with the Star Wars arcade, because they were liquidating them. It was only like, I want to say it was like $50 for the two. And I loved this thing. I know it was a complete failure. I loved it though. I loved this. I loved Virtua Fighter on the 32X. I was a huge Virtua Fighter fan in the arcade. Whenever I would manage to get to an arcade, I would always look for Virtua Fighter, because I loved the visual style of the game, and I thought it was so good on the Sega 32X. Obviously, I have some copies of my book here as well, the complete guide to the Sega 32X, available on Amazon. Yes, I'm plugging myself, but yeah, like I love this game. You know, I love the 32X. I had a complete Sega 32X collection, and yes, I got rid of most of it because I don't need it. I can play it. I can play it on a million different emulators, but these two games are actually original, not original, but I've had these since I was like 18, so these are some of the oldest things in my collection, so I definitely wanted to keep that. Sega Saturn, pretty much just keeping some nostalgia stuff, you know, your Virtua Fighters, your Daytona USAs. Obviously the two big games there are Panzer Dragoon Saga and Dragon Force. Now, how I came into possession of these was from back when I had a P.O. box. I know people still want me to have a P.O. box. Maybe one day I'll get one again, but a viewer by the name of Milton sent me these games, and I can't even explain the situation. Brett, just go ahead and show the clip of me unboxing that.
Math and computer science teacher, 20 years into it. Yeah, Milton. Milton. What the hell is this? What is this? Milton! Milton! I am done. I am done.
Yeah, so it was a very magical time. The Dreamcast side of things, we have Shenmue and Grandia 2. Now, Shenmue was one of those games, much like Super Mario 64, that I was like, okay, we did it again. We've hit the peak of graphics. We've hit the peak of just what you could do. I remember going to Pecker Dupree's house in Georgia, and he had a Dreamcast, and I didn't have a Dreamcast, and we played like NFL 2K and Shenmue 2, and I was just, I mean Shenmue as well, and I was just blown away. I could not believe what this game was, just the world that it crafted, because this was pre Grand Theft Auto 3. This was pre open world stuff, and I still think the world in Shenmue is one of the best open worlds, just because of how everyone is on a time system and how everything is on a time system. Businesses open, businesses close, you have to sleep, you know, it's just magical. It's a magical game, and I know a lot of people don't like it in retrospect, and they feel like it was overhyped, and it was a big failure for Sega, unfortunately, when you talk about development costs versus how much they made back. But I don't care, man. Shenmue is one of the best games ever. Grandia 2 was a game that I had purchased secondhand. I had started playing it when my mother came to visit me. She was actually staying in my little smelly apartment. I felt so bad for her because it smelled like cigarettes and ass in there. But she was staying with me, and so I gave her my bed and I slept on the couch, and I ended up playing that game for 26 hours straight, and I don't even know why. Like, she came out the next morning and was like, why are you still up? I was like, what are you talking about? She was like, have you not been to bed yet? And I was like, no. Why? And she was like, because it's morning. And I looked at the window and I was like, this one I used to drink a lot of Diet Dr. Pepper, so I was always hyped up on caffeine because I didn't drink the caffeine free stuff. So yeah, I ended up playing Grandia 2 for 26 hours straight and beating it, and yeah, I can't tell you a single thing about it. I just remember starting it and ending it, and everything in the middle was a blur. So that's the Sega stuff, you know. Moving on, we really don't have too many crazy stories here. You know, this video's gone on for a pretty long time. We have some PlayStation stuff here. One PlayStation 2 game, that being Gran Turismo 2. I remember playing Gran Turismo 2 via Bleem, which was available on Dreamcast. It allowed you to play select games, Metal Gear Solid, Tekken 3, and Gran Turismo 2 via emulation on your Dreamcast with upscaled textures and stuff. So that's really where I played a ton of Gran Turismo 2, but I loved this game. You know, this was during the time frame of where car culture was becoming a big thing. You know, the Fast and the Furious, Gone in 60 Seconds. These are starting to become like household names, and Gran Turismo 2, in my opinion, was like the Mac Daddy of racing games, just because you had so many cars. You had import cars that you had never even heard of before if you were younger, and it really taught a lot of people about cars and car culture in general. So I have just so many fond memories of playing Gran Turismo 2. Great game. I still think it holds up well today. Obviously there's so many Gran Turismo games now. We have Gran Turismo in VR, but move outside and let the man go through. Let the man go through. And then of course we have the Metal Gear Solid collection, and Metal Gear Solid 2. I have a full video dedicated to that game, but essentially what Metal Gear Solid 2 means to me was, you know, I was in a rough place in life. It was one of those sort of crossroads situations where, you know, I was dabbling in a lot of drugs, and, you know, I wasn't living good, and it was, you know, setting me up for failure. You know, I probably would have been dead or in jail if it wasn't for Metal Gear Solid 2, because one time it decided to randomly snow in North Carolina. I was snowed in, so I couldn't go party. And I was upset, but I was like, you know what? I got this PlayStation 2. I wasn't even really playing video games at that time. I was like, I got this PS2. I got this Metal Gear Solid 2 game that I bought for like $3 at GameStop, because the used copies used to be all over the place. I was like, I want to play this game. You know, it'll be something to pass the time. And that sucked me back into video games, like that story, because at that time I hadn't really played anything with a story that really captivated me quite like that did, in terms of thinking, you know, in terms of thinking about politics and how the world works and stuff like that. And, you know, Lolly Lule Lo, the Patriots, the secret people that run the country, like that got me into so many conspiracy theories. And plus, I loved the dialogue in Metal Gear Solid 2. I loved all the hidden things in Metal Gear Solid 2. So I made a full video about how that game saved my life, but I honestly mean that when I say it. Like, that game essentially got me back onto the path of loving video games. And, you know, if it wasn't for that game, who knows where I would be in life, if I would still be alive, if I'd be dead or in jail, you know, because I've lost a lot of friends along the way who, you know, never found something besides drugs and partying to latch onto to make them feel something inside. And I was lucky. I was blessed, you know, right place, right time, you know, divine intervention sort of thing. So Metal Gear Solid 2 is probably the most important game like ever to me, and it will always be the most important game to me. And then we have some PlayStation 3 stuff here, you know, nothing too crazy. PS4 stuff, little PS5 stuff. I buy a lot of PS5 stuff digitally, I've been realizing. Xbox, I'm not going to talk too much about this stuff. This was kind of just random things, but I will talk about Showdown Legends of Wrestling, because I remember seeing Showdown Legends of Wrestling on a poster at a GameStop, and I was like, what in God's name is this? Me and Malott went to Fayetteville, which was where we would have to go at the time, because our town didn't have a GameStop. All we had was a Walmart and then a Kmart. So if we wanted to get cheap games, you know, we'd go out there. It was a military area, so you could get lots of good used games. But I remember going into the GameStop, and they had a poster for this, and I was like, what the hell is this? And there was this lanky dude who looked kind of like early 2000s Andrew Reynolds, and it was actually early 2000s, so maybe it was Andrew Reynolds. And he was like, oh man, that's Showdown Legends of Wrestling. It's based on the Legends of Wrestling games, but it's going to be like so much better because I got all these people in it, and like I got a brand new engine. If you pre-order it now, you can get a t-shirt. And I was like, no, I don't want to pre-order it, but I will buy it when it comes out. And I ended up buying it, and it was a broken game. Like, it was Acclaim's last published game and developed game. It wasn't finished, but they had to release it because they were going bankrupt. And I don't know, I just love this game because I love the roster, and I love that it's Tony Schiavone, Bobby the Brain Heenan, rest in peace, and Larry Zbyszko on the commentary. Yes, it's very repetitive, but the roster is freaking awesome. And funnily enough, I have that promotional t-shirt nowadays. Here's a look at it. Just like, look at this cover art though. Like, you got Hogan, you got Sting, you got Andre, you got Macho, you got Jake the Snake. Like, this is peak wrestling for a lot of kids. And, you know, people who grew up during that era. So I have a very fond attachment to this game. A lot of nostalgia for it because I remember playing it and being so disappointed, but I will still play that game with a smile on my face just because I could find some enjoyment out of it. It's one of those games that, like, yes, it's a bad game, but I could still enjoy a bad game from time to time. We've got some random Xbox 360 stuff here. We've got some Xbox One stuff. It's funny how much Xbox stuff I have, considering I don't like Xbox, or that's what people say about me. And, you know, Xbox is quite a few Xbox related things here, and then, you know, some Evercade stuff and a controller. So that's it. You know, that's pretty much my collection. I will show you guys the other bookshelf right now. It just has mostly random stuff on it, just stuff that, you know, doesn't have a home, or stuff that I want to display and stuff, some Goosebumps books and, you know, just random crap. But I like the way that this is set up. I have lots of space between these two shelves because I'm still buying stuff. You know, I still plan on buying games. I have games that I need to catalog, actually. But I left myself up with it. I could space things out a lot easier. You know, I could space things out and make things look how I want them to look and, you know, work how I want them to work. But these are the games that, like, I decided to keep. You know, these were the ones that were important to me. These are the ones that I have nostalgia for. These are the ones that I have memories of friendship or family or growing up, or, you know, whatever the case may be. And, you know, people still ask me, do I have regrets about selling it? And it's like, no. As each day goes by, I get happier and happier that I sold it, because, you know, I have so much more space now. Now I have this brand new work area where I filmed the controller video. And yeah, I'm still working on stuff. I know the audio was kind of weird in that video, but you know, I was trying a different mic setup, but now I have a new work area where I can film different stuff. And now I have like 2 work areas. I'm like, that's super cool to me to have that down here, because now I have that bookshelf moved over here. It gave me a lot more space. So yeah, I don't really, you know, hopefully you stuck around towards the end of this video, because it's probably the longest video on this channel. But I just wanted to share with you guys, you know, the stories behind the games that I kept, the logic behind the games that I kept, and the reasoning behind it. Make sure you guys go follow Brett on social media, because Brett will be editing this video, because I didn't want to, and he's gonna have a lot of work cut out for him. It's at Brett NLL. So Brett, put your thing up on the screen right here. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the stories behind the games and kind of the logic and reasoning behind why I kept what I kept, because most of the games have a story, but some of them, I don't know, I just kept them to keep them. Let me know what you think of everything in the comment section down below. Thank you guys for checking out this video. I know it's a long one, but you guys wanted it, so, you know, Long's gonna give it to you. All right, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.